Hello again. The subject of our talk is a trial to answer this question. Can we break the curse of our evolutionary mismatches? There are two evolutionary mismatches with our contemporary complicated life that dominates how our brains function in our daily lives. The first one of these two mismatches is related to the fact that our brain's innate functionality had developed mainly in a hunter-gatherer environment. The evolutionary history of modern humans, Homo sapiens sapiens, and their extinct predecessors in the genus Homo, Australopithecus afarensis, Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Homo neanderthalensis, and several others, spans almost 7 million years. And humans have been living in large societies only after adopting farming around 12,000 years ago, and in modernity since the scientific revolution in the 17th century. The modern humans and their brains have been sculpted and refined by the forces of natural selection that endow these biological organs, I mean here, the brains of ourselves, the modern humans, with hardwired innate networks that are adaptable, suitable, compatible with the hunter-gatherer lifestyle, not our modern sophisticated lives. The second mismatch, which I mentioned in the beginning of our talk, emerges from the factual context of the first mismatch and is related to the default attitude for humans to seek immediate gratification and discount any future reward on the basis that it may not materialize in the future, as there were no assurances for the human brains that guarantee the possibility of living for another day during almost all the evolutionary history of our species. In other words, we modern humans have two big problems. Our brains are designed for hunter-gatherer lifestyle and are motivated naturally to seek immediate gratification and seize the nearest reward without contemplating the future prospects that may not materialize. Research in brain physiology points to a perpetual battle between two regions of the brain when it comes to decision making and opting for an immediate reward or a delayed one. On the one hand, the normal activity in the nucleus accumbens and the ventral tegmental area, which are both regions along the mesolimbic dopaminergic pathway that are responsible together for continuously seeking all types of immediate rewards, which can maximize the fitness of the organism in the form of survival and more possibilities for reproduction. On the other hand, the prefrontal cortex which is a part of the brain that is responsible for higher order cognitive capacities and acts like a brake that can negatively suppress the activity of the immediate reward-seeking regions in the brain, the nucleus accumbens and the ventral tegmentum. The prefrontal cortex is physiologically associated with cognitive control and the ability to maintain, manipulate, and integrate goal-relevant information over time delays that enable future-oriented behaviors after being dissociated from impulsive desires during the course of our daily lives. This eternal and perpetual battle can be conceptualized as humans' perpetual desire-reason conundrum. However, there is a very special character of the incessant struggle between the desire push and the reason resistance in our brain. It is related to the fact that the prefrontal cortex does not come with fully fledged functional capabilities when we are born, but it needs nurturing and training to gain its full power as it reflects a recent anatomical emergence in our evolutionary journey. In fact, the prefrontal cortex is a major part of what makes us human. Nonetheless, the reward-seeking regions in our brains are very similar to those in the other mammalian species, without too much anatomical or even physiological difference. They work according to the hard-wired innate networks that can be only modified slightly with life experiences and operant conditioning without diminishing the scope for their functionality. So they are built-in default hard-wired networks ready-made and ready for using and utilizing when we are born. In other words, humans need to train hard to be able to think rationally, but they are born with natural tendencies to seek basic rewards such as food, drink, shelter, and reproduction that maximize their fitness for survival and reproduction, or any other intermediary reward that can eventually lead to this basic reward. I repeat it. It's very essential to understand this point. Humans need to train and work hard to be able to think rationally and use the supercomputational power of their prefrontal cortices. However, they are born with natural tendencies to seek basic rewards such as food, drink, shelter, and reproduction action that maximize the fitness for survival and reproduction and passing the genes of the individual, the organism, to the following generation, or seek any other intermediary reward that can lead eventually to these basic rewards, which are food, drink, shelter, and reproduction. Act. There is also another special characteristics of the prefrontal cortex related to the fact that higher mental capabilities in the human brain are big consumers of energy in the form of glucose, whose sources were scarce during most of the evolutionary process of our species. That led to a universal tendency in the brain to rely on basic hardwired reactions in the reward-seeking regions that consume much less energy to steer our orientation along with the emotional neural networks in our midbrain that act in a very similar manner to the reward-seeking regions without involving the energy-hungry parts of the brain. I mean here the prefrontal cortex. In other words, our default tendency are towards using simplified and sometimes oversimplified models of thinking and habitual and emotional reactions to preserve energy without involving our energy-consuming higher mental capabilities in the form of the work of the prefrontal cortex. As we said earlier, we know that the prefrontal cortex needs nurturing, education, and training to be fully functional. Let us now contemplate the actuality of this happening in our modern lives. Our educational systems are mainly formulated to manufacture obedient individuals who are meticulous in following our efficient and sometimes Machiavellian learning tricks to pass the exams, then seek employment in which they receive orders from the top and they have to comply with these orders without any power to question them in the majority of cases. Teaching, free thinking, creativity, logic, and perspective taking is not part of our educational system. Also, the complexity of our modern lives had produced a new system of social connections through the internet and social media that consumes around 7 hours of our day time globally, mostly in passive consumption mode that does not operate the higher mental capabilities in any way, but activates mostly the emotional parts of the brain that triggers strong feelings in the form of fight or flight reaction, which is the key magnet that maximizes the probability that the individual will stay longer on one of these virtual platforms or click on one of the clickbaits that fill the space of all these platforms. Similarly, all contemporary modes of conducting politics are built on playing on this strings of emotions, not manifestos, or programs that require scrutiny and in-depth analysis. We live in the era of emotional and identity politics that is based on our primitive evolutionary instincts to follow herd mentality, stereotyping, prejudice, and simplified generalizations that do not require the prefrontal cortex with its higher mental, analytical, and computational powers. As absorbing and assimilating these fallacies, herd mentality, stereotyping, prejudice, and simplified generalization passively is reserved to the other less sophisticated parts of our brains that we share with all other mammalian species. The same can be said about exchanging information systems in the market economy that dominate the globe now, which are based on the main principle of the advertising industry, which works to manufacture primal urges, invented needs, and falsified illusions, and avoids at all costs the risk of creating informed consumers that can compare facts that are usually hidden in fine print and drowned in a flood of terms and conditions and other legalese, as in the perspective of the advertising industry. It is better for everybody not to trouble her or his prefrontal cortex with these unnecessary details and remain a happy, docile, unwitty, and most importantly, passive consumer. I repeat it. It is the perspective of the advertising industry that it is better for you and me not to trouble yours and mine prefrontal cortex with any of what they see unnecessary details and remain happy, docile, unwitty, and passive consumer without the need to use our prefrontal cortices at all. As always, the question that arises when we are faced with such grim description of certain concealed facts about the nature of our individual and societal lives cannot escape from presenting itself in the form of the old question, which I hear it all the time. What can I do then? And the answer, as it always has been, is simple and without too many details, and is based on refusing to retire the unique powers of your brain and my brain by accepting what is common makes it right. It is wrong. The brain should always have the right to work, And always it is correct to look critically at anything, and if something is common, that doesn't make it right. Also, we have to remember that the only way to nurture our prefrontal cortices and their wisdom can only happen through working hard to self-educate ourselves outside the bubble of the traditional educational system, as well as the echo chambers of the social media, as we discussed earlier. It is also worth remembering that brain physiology reminds us with the golden rule of brain functionality, which says that the most efficient way to refine, sharpen, and lubricate our higher mental, analytical, and computational skills is by learning and practicing how to cooperate, interact, dialogue, exchange information with other fellow human beings in order to allow our higher mental capacities to flourish and break the vicious cycle and curse of our evolutionary mismatches and dismantle the shackles that keep these evolutionary mismatches dominant and pervasive in our daily lives. I hope that I managed to provide you with helpful information, and I look forward to meeting up with you in the near future. Goodbye.